So Arun had a lot of great things to say about Ken and about this meetup. My name is Mark Boysen, for those that we haven't met. I'm an expert coach. What that means is I have been working for a while on this, and this talk is an expert, I would say an expert level talk. It's probably not for somebody that's starting out, but more for the coaches and potentially Scrum Masters in the organization. I did hear some folks from CA. I was I did work for CA a number of years ago, and in a previous life, and as part of the reason or how I discovered Agile. There's a problem statement about my talk here. I typically run about 15 minutes, so please ding me, Fernando, at 14 minutes, and I'll try to make sure that I'm on time. Just curiosity, how many times has this happened to anybody? You can do show of emotions here, or emojis, raise your hand. You walk into a coaching engagement, and what works well in one engagement doesn't work at all in another engagement. Just show of hands, how many people have run into that? A few folks. Kind of my conclusion, or the reason, or the prelude to this talk, is I ran into a customer that they said all the right things when I'm doing the onboarding, we're ironing out going through the process to start the engagement, and the kind of it's like day 4, I tried to do a ways of working exercise, and they didn't want to do it. Okay, why is that? Ways of working is just, how do we work together? How do we handle conflict? What is our agreed upon tools, systems of, where are we going to work? Where's our board going to be, our Kanban board, etc. And they just flat out refused. They didn't want to do it, anything to do with it. And, I kind of was curious. I mean, why is that? And, it was kind of baffled me a little bit. It had nothing to do with me. So I started doing discovery, and, I kind of found some patterns of the culture that, pretty much everything in the culture is broken. And I don't want to name the customer, but you would probably know it if I said it. And when I say culture is broken, leadership, accountability, ownership, of what it is, heavy focus on tools and process over people, almost counter to what we would normally expect in a coaching engagement. And I started with the discovery, and I've been working in a related topic in coaching for a while, which was the parallel to polyvagal theory. And polyvagal theory is a counseling technique that talks about our atomic nervous system. Everybody has an atomic nervous system, at least everybody on the call that's been vetted. And what happens, there's something called neuroception. We know when it's safe, we know instantly. And the best story I can describe to this is I flew into Sao Paulo for a CA event a long time ago. As soon as I stepped off the plane, I didn't feel safe. In that psychological safety, your antennas go up, and it's like, whoa, there's something that's not right here. And what's happening behind our wiring here is how we're hardwired is a story of connection, protection, or disconnection. There's really three states. And our nervous system knows, we're instantly knowing if we're in a state of connection, which is most Agile clients, it's a fun environment. The world is fun. Let's be curious. Let's collaborate together. It's called the hierarchy here. There's 3 levels of hierarchy. Is ventral vagal, the state of flow, which is what we usually try to achieve in where we're trying to coach our teams to. And there's a sympathetic state. This is where people shut down or we go into a mode of fight or flight. And this is the danger zone. It's kind of where we get into judgment, criticism. We're better than. One of the recent cohorts I just completed was the protection of self, or when our bias towards leadership, where we're colluding because we're better than another group. And then finally, the state of disconnection, the feeling of hopelessness, numb, disassociated. This is where somebody is, there's probably a good chance that they're clinically depressed. And why I bring this up is this particular client was in a state of disconnection. The culture was a state of disconnection. Organizations are built of individuals that comprise together the collection. The culture was a very hard culture to coach, and it takes a lot of energy. Now, what does this look like? There's a polyvagal ladder, and the association here is these folks, this particular client was in a frozen state or freeze, the disassociation. And why, from a coaching perspective, I'll get into this in a second, is I had to change my coaching stance. I had to look at it from a different perspective. All of our tools are usually in the yellow and the green to help, coach teams to psychological safety, being curious. But when the client is completely shut down, there's the heart rate races, the blood pressure, and things that are simple, such as even a ways of working, isn't going to work in the client. So, basically my conclusion or my hypothesis here is there's a need for tools that start to get into the level of these, I would say, laggers in the innovation curve, where, many of the larger organizations have a lot of drama and trauma within the organization. And as a coach, I'm not allowed by HR to go into the organization and coach for trauma. I mean, we're not trained for that either. But what we have done is started to bring in conversations about regulation. Let's keep a focus on the meetings. We need regulation in terms of structure, so that the purple squirrel runs across the yard and we don't lose the meeting. Or I also had to bring in resilience for the team and then learning from our mistakes. And, also psychological safety, measuring PQ. PQ as a health measure of the team is something new from Vision Lakshmi on Mind Valley. And then language, just a quick, simple example of helping to connect. The language made all the difference. And helping to teach mindset, a quick example was what's in it for me, and then actually having to share, hey, you don't have to do these Herculean efforts in order to deliver. This means sustainable pace. That means that you don't have to work weekends anymore. And when we did our product forums and we switched our coaching stance to very specific at the individual level, what's in it for me? What does this mean to me? We had our highest attendance and then satisfaction rating of the talks. And then finally, mindset. Mindset was really super important in this particular client, because we had to help them connect the dots to how anything that was abstract, anything that was not necessarily spelled out in terms of, step 1, step 2, step 3, they couldn't follow. So we had to connect the dots for them. And, I'll leave you with a couple thoughts here. Is the challenge for me is, as I was going through this, is I believe we're here as coaches to help heal some of these organizations, or create, maybe not heal in the sense that we're this is what I embarked on, but they're 30% of these folks that are disconnected in this frozen state are geniuses. They need a coach to pull them out, and that's the only way they're going to get out of their current situation. All right, I'm going to pause. If you have any questions, feel free to ask away.
You mean you will pause and then you will continue with offering your suggestions how we can possibly deal with situations like this, or?
Yeah, if you have any questions on the talk, I will stop here and let you ask questions. So if that's the format. So.
Yeah, Alex, I just enabled you. Can you ask a question?
Thank you. Thank you for the talk. Very interesting. I have the freeze, which I was introduced to it quite recently. I didn't know about that. I knew about the flight and flight, but the freeze, I did not understand it. And the way they explained it to me was you have a deer on a highway, you have the lights on it, and it will freeze. It will not move from the highway.
Yeah.
But you said something very interesting where how can we move the people that are in the freeze mode to bring them down at least on a fight and flight, or even lower from your graph, basically from the red to the yellow to the green? What can we do to enable them, or what tools do we give them to bring them down from the graph?
Yeah, very good question, Alec. It's thinking about it from a very basic level, and it's, they may not be open to trying anything, but it really is going to test your coaching ability. And you're going to be gaslit potentially in the culture that you're crazy, you're whatever, but it's really staying solid in yourself, but offering, hey, here's what it is, give an example of what it is. And if we try just a little bit, what would a sustainable pace look like for you? And let them see the light. This takes an incredible amount of time.
And patience.
Yeah, patience and resilience, and helping to, we had to slow down in terms of a year into this. I told my customer, I was like, we got to build psychological safety. They're not used to it being a safe environment from previous bad leadership or metrics being weaponized against them, whatever. So we had to completely rebuild the messaging from the leadership.
Thank you.
Ken raised his hand. Ken, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I love this because, I'm thinking about how, we can build empathy on where they currently are to connect with these folks, right? And maybe even help them to see the patterns, right?
Yeah.
So how did you approach leadership and those that were engaging you in kind of reviewing this or incorporating this into the approach?
Really good question. Is part of our change management plan, or OCM plan, organizational change management, for those that don't know what the term means. This was part of the discovery process, and it took about 6 months, really, Ken, to understand what was going on in the organization. I had never experienced it at this level, and thankfully I have a sponsor that, as soon as I showed it to him, he's like, the light bulb went off. And then we started to get into the, how are we going to address this and socialize it with the senior leadership, so that the C levels to, like, hey, our messaging. Thankfully, there was another parallel coaching effort where they had brought in something else that was external to my effort to, help raise connection. And so to establish psychological safety, you need connection, clarity, and my mind went blank. Connection, clarity, and the third one, I'll Google it here and I'll put it in the chat. But that really became the emphasis or the driver behind our entire messaging out to the organization to create the psychological safety. And, hey, let's not weaponize, our OCM scorecard against the people. Let's help them. Let's find out where their challenges are, and then let's try to show progress of what we're doing to change it or move it.
So Jita also wanted to give some input, right, Jita? Let me unmute you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think he answered my question. I was going to ask him, at what point when you started your coaching did you figure out like what state the organization was? Like I know every like the coaching session is time bound, so that also takes a while to figure out. But I think you answered that question. That's why I lowered my hand.
It's a really good question. Thank you.
Fernando.
Oh, we are running out of time. Just a quick question for clarification. You mentioned PQ in one of your slides.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with one PQ, which is part of positive intelligence coaching. I've been part of that program for a year now. Are you referring to the same PQ?
It's the same concept. The acronym might be different, but it is really the health of the team is, as simple as measuring where is the team on a week-to-week basis and then aggregating it. We had smiley faces from, red, angry to, or whatever red meant for the team, to green on the other end. And really, trying to start to measure where our teams are at. What we're finding is, of course, they're over capacity, or they're burned out, or they're not supported by their manager, etc. So,
all right. Thank you. I think we run out of time now. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I'll give a stop sharing.
Okay, Andrea.
Yes, and actually the second speaker tonight is Natalie, and the title of her talk is Project versus Product Mindset.
Yeah, let me share my screen. And actually, I was thinking that my talk kind of a little bit spends on one of the reasons why there might be misunderstanding from the top management in the company of why the agile transformation might be needed at all and what exactly it is. One of the reasons, and let me explain my ideas on that. I already introduced myself previously. I'm a co-founder of a software development agency. I'm also a mother of this funny guy called Mr. Simon, which is a job interview preparation tool. And today I want to talk about enterprise digital transformation. And one of the reasons I think it often goes slowly and painfully. Of course, there are other reasons as well, but I think this one is common enough that it is worth talking about. To start with, let's recall what we understand as digital transformation. And I asked, guess who I asked this question? I'm sure you know, guys, but you're muted, so I'm not torturing you. I asked ChatGPT, of course, what is digital transformation? And look what that person responded to me. Let me highlight some pieces. using digital technologies to fundamentally change how businesses operate to deliver and deliver value to customers. Adoption of new digital technologies to create new business models, improve processes, and enhance customer experience. Interesting, right? Let me dwell on the last one a little bit. And I want to say that it is no accident experience plays such a significant part in a successful digital transformation. There is a theory introduced about 25 years ago that explains the stages of economic value, how it evolved through the centuries. A long time ago, the main form of value was commodities or natural resources. It still exists in the global market, but with industrial economy, another type of value was introduced to us as humanity, which is economy of goods. Then in the 20th century, a new economy of services developed with the differentiation and everything. But nowadays, we find ourselves in the economic age of experience. People are tired of the same relatively good, but still boring level of goods and services. We all are looking, especially after the pandemic, we all are looking for unique, exciting, and customized experiences. So it is really a hot topic nowadays. This is why experience is such a big part in the definition of digital transformation. ChatGPT also mentions the current environment businesses operate in. It is a rapidly changing digital landscape. And as businesses, we need to become more agile, innovative, and customer focused. To summarize the definition, I would say to stay current and successful, businesses need to invest their research and development activities into these two main areas: breakthrough innovations, such as new business models, and continuous improvements, such as improving existing processes and enhancing customer experience. And here lies the problem. You cannot achieve neither of these two areas with a project mindset alone. You also need, and importantly so, you need product mindset, which is much better suited to solve creative problems, such as breakthrough innovations and improvement initiatives. What do we think about when we hear project management? These are some keywords typically associated with it: transparency, predictability, reliability, completion, success. And indeed, as a discipline, it gradually was developed to transform chaos into clarity and order, to ensure successful completion, which is the bottom line indicator of success for many, back to the previous lightning talk, which is the bottom line indicator of success for the company business stakeholders so often. So it was definitely a great achievement, because it took us from chaos and unknowns. It can take us to order and completion. Some history of this evolution: great projects have been completed far before our times, but recently people started developing methodologies to make projects more transparent and manageable. Let me list some notable milestones. Henry Gant developed a scheduling diagram. Critical path method was invented to predict project duration for complex projects. Work breakdown structure was developed by Department of Defense while they were creating a ballistic missile project. It was later adopted by many businesses. International PM Association was founded in Vienna, the first of its kind. PMI was founded, Project Management Institute, in Pennsylvania. But with more and more projects becoming digital, a need emerges now for different approaches to project management. An HBR article borrowed the term Scrum, as you guys, most of you I'm sure know, from sports to emphasize teamwork, and named it as a new PM style. Still, PMBOK was published, PM Body of Knowledge, a set of standards in classical PM. But PM already leans more and more towards Agile approach. Agile Manifesto started a new era. We can see that as great as project management methodologies are for solving complex projects, such as building spaceships, at some point they started proving ineffective when applied to less brick and mortar areas. And this is where product management mindset is a far better fit. These are some keywords we typically associate with it. Strategy, ever evolving, always fluid, responsive to feedback. Vision, you must be a creative person to have a great vision. You need to be passionate about your vision so that others can believe in it. Research, discovery, nothing is set in stone for you. You need to have an open mind and discovery skills. Identify, hypotheses, ideas. Only a creative person can thrive in the unknown and identify great ideas in it. And of course, it's all about the customer, their needs, finding the product market fit. So let's summarize. What are some of the major differences between the two? There is certainly an overlap, but that is not the point of my conversation today. I want to focus on the differences. So let's do some quick feature comparison. How do we handle the unknown? With project management, we try to minimize it. With product management, we thrive in the unknown. What does completion mean to us? As a project manager, completion means success. My project is completed. I am successful. With product management mindset, it is a failure. If my product is completed and closed, I failed. Who is the king? As a project manager, control is a king for me. As a product manager, open mind is a king for me. Where do I draw ultimate satisfaction? As a project manager, it is from achieving on time, on budget, and on scope. With product management, I draw satisfaction when I see delighted customers, when I see revenue growing. How do I handle scope creep? As a project manager, it is my enemy. It is to be resisted. As a product manager, it is life. It is to be embraced. And finally, how do I view budget? As a project manager, ideally, it is fixed. As a product manager, ideally, it is open. Finally, let me share some takeaways I read in a really interesting book I recently read on this topic. Some takeaways. Digital transformation in many cases is a key to business growth, but even survival. IT has been treated as cost center, but now it has to become a core function of business, a co-creator of value. Business and technology departments need to establish a common language for defining goals, objectives, and success, how to measure success. People need to understand how their outcomes contribute to business results. Products go through various stages in their life cycle, and outcome of each stage should be measured differently. For example, you cannot expect prototyping or MVP activities to be measured with the same KPIs as a product in a growth stage. It would be ridiculous. And final thought, startups enter markets with a product mindset rather than project mindset. And it puts them at a huge advantage because they create products while corporations lag behind doing projects. That is it, and I'm happy to hear your thoughts, guys. Whoever can unmute yourselves, of course. I'm really looking forward for an exchange because I don't have like 30 years of experience in, I'm kind of torn between project and product, and I would be really interested to hear your thoughts. If we do have time for that. Gary, do we? Yeah, let me unmute. Can you unmute? Yeah, you unmuted.
Yeah, I'm not keeping the time, but I think there's still a few. It wasn't Fernando, I think, keeping time.
Fernando is a timekeeper, sorry.
Yes.
Yes, we have 3 more minutes.
7 minutes. Okay.
3.
3 minutes. Yeah.
Oh.
So, I see Fee and Joseph. Fee, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so I came from a big corporate, so I understand very well on project. And just recently, the past 5-6 years, I was all on startup, so I also understand products. So I totally agree with you about products now is king, because it's seeing how the startup operate. It's all about products. Yeah, it's never been like a project anymore, and I can see how it's working, how it's success going through the startup world.
But in enterprises, would you agree that this is still not even close to being the mindset of the business?
No, it's not even close. So now this is my 3rd day at work coming back to the enterprise world. So it's going to be a challenge for me to go back from startup. Yeah.
You will be an ambassador.
Yeah.
Let me unmute. Let me unmute Joseph. Joseph, you wanted to chime in.
Yeah. So quick comment. This actually resonates with the current climate right now in technology and distractions and all that. And it kind of reminds me of the Agile manifesto, where we have this, we value things on the right. Things to the left are still important, and they still, we still have to look at them, but we value things to the right. So I completely agree with what you said, and it's actually very thought-provoking presentation.
Thank you. Alex, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the presentation, but I have one question exactly on this slide. Can you, because I do not understand it, like, to me it doesn't make any sense. Can you explain more about the meaning of completion? Okay, I understand the project is a success, but the failure, that I do not understand where that comes from.
Okay. I thought this might be a provocative point.
Thank you.
Yeah, my thinking is product is like a baby. You initiate the idea, you bear it, then it is born as a prototype, as an MVP, then it grows, product goes into growth stage. And very much like a real person, if your life is over, if you die, well, it's not exactly a failure, it is just the way things work, but it is not you would be happy about dying. Similar with a product, if your product dies, it means, well, it is sad, isn't it? That's what I thought. Yeah. Okay, so I see Mo wanted to chime in, but we want to be also aware of the time. So Andrea, back to you, I guess. Sorry, Mo.
Yes, sorry, we are trying to, since the time, yes.
Yeah, and you can
running
always ask questions via chat.
Exactly. We have the Slack channel, so I would encourage any discussion. There is a Lightning Talk channel. You can add yourself, and we can continue like there, because all those topics have a lot of follow-up, invite a lot of discussions.
Yeah. Or the chat here within here as well.
Yes, that's true. This chat for live discussion, of course. Yes. And our next speaker is Fee, and Fee is our DevOps specialist. And your topic was on a security incident?
Yes. So let me try to share screen. Okay, here we go. Okay. So got it. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so today I just want to talk about a little bit about the DevOps and securities and how the two things blend together. Security, we all know how important security is. If you're in the big corporates in the enterprise, there certainly is a big security group that tell you how should be do this, should not be do that, right? So they enforce that policy for a region, you know, because we live in a world of the internet, and you know, lots of people try to break into the corporate, try to deflate your corporate image. For small startup companies, certainly there is no big security group, but there's still some sort of security awareness and concern. So I came from big corporates as well as the small startup, where small startup mean like 5-6 employees to like 40 employees. Security practice still number one thing that everyone was really concerned about. So there's several approaches for security practice. The defensive approach, where you embrace the culture, create a culture that aware about security. Also, you invest in the infrastructures to try to prevent security incident from happening. Also, take the offensive approach. Mean, you know, you corporate constantly do what they call penetration tests, where it's either hire a third-party company, security expert company, to run what we call pen tests on your system to find out, you know, if there's any security holes beforehand, and then try to fix it. And also created monitorings on activities that is, you know, unusual, that may cause from somebody trying to break into your system. So how DevOps involved with all of the securities practice? We do automation. So automation from the get-go, where security concern is or practice is coming from somebody writing lines of code, until like QA testing, and then product tests, you know, the whole 9 years of the every stage of the development cycle. We have a security automation inside. And then of course we use the tools and methods to help the security practices. For myself, for DevOps, I did set up a lot of security related monitors. For example, set up a monitor where if you see a password failure for the same user for 20 times over the periods of like 2 minutes, then you can see that there's some fishy activity going on. And then when that happens, the monitor will send a notification to interested party or security group that will look further into those activity and have a further action. So in this slide, I want to talk about a very specific incident that happened to one of the company that I worked for before. So it's coming from a security contractor or security experts from Algeria. So apparently he's scanning, you know, several corporate URL and try to look for holes. And apparently he found a hole in the company that I used to work for, and he reset the password for the company accounts, several employees from the company accounts, and then afterward he sent an email to the CEO asking for a job that he claimed that he is a security expert. He can come in and fix security hole, right? So with the security response team inside, we identified the illegal activity like much earlier when the guy just reset 1 or 2 password account, and we know right away. So part of the DevOps, I did block the IP address coming from that person, and then when he saw it blocked, he do a proxy into another one, and then change the IP address. So I blocked the whole traffic coming from that area, like Algeria, and then eventually from North Africa. But it's still happening. So I blocked the whole URL that did the reset. So meanwhile, the engineering team is found the problem and try to fix the security hole and create a hot fix and fix it. And so eventually the guy can only reset 2 employee account password. And the whole incident happened for like more than 30 minutes, less than an hour, right? So after that, we, as the responsibility to our customer, we did notify the customer, even though the problem were not affecting the customer account at all, but we do have to notify our customer about the incident. So why we respond so fast like that? So over the year, the company went over quite some security practice and cultures to go over the security's response. And then we actually 2-3 times a year, we actually have a real a security drill response, so that we create we hire like a contract security contract firm to create like a real security incident event, and have the everyone in the company to participate in the drill. So that we did put some practicing, and then that's how we can respond back to that instance so fast. So next slide is for question.
There is a question in the chat. Glenn is asking, is there a mechanism to report that IP violating security, including notification of authorities in Algeria, FBI, if US firm was attacked, Interpol?
Report the IP violation security. I'm not sure if we can where we can report it, but certainly we can find out that IP address. And the best we can do is just like blocking that IP address from coming to our traffics here. But I'm not sure if reporting that there's a mean to reporting that to I don't know what authority to report it to, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about, because ultimately, right, the trick is to catch these individuals or groups that are doing this type of work, and prevent them from doing it again to somebody else, right? And let alone the possibility of seeking some sort of civil penalties for doing that, because these could be the same people that are the ones that you're hearing about that are breaking into credit card.
I went to several security conferences, and then I heard like story about people just doing security breaking just to get the ransom. So I'm not sure if it's illegal to do that activity, because I've seen like people saying a story that, okay, so my company got a guy to come in and then found the security holes and then threatened to tell the whole world that about this unless you pay a ransom. So I don't know. So this particular incident, the guy was just like trying to find a job. So yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but it's malicious intent when they're going to change passwords and things of that nature. So that's why I was wondering, like, there could be criminal prosecution if you're able to identify. A challenge, of course, is they can spoof the IP addresses. So unless there's a way that you can track that down specifically.
We can track that specific IP address if we have a right tool. So the company I used to work for is that use AWS, and then we set up a WAF, stand for the web application firewall, and from the WAF we can see whole kind of activity coming to our app, and including IP address. But the reporting part, I don't know.
So there is another question in the chat. It's from Mo, and let me unmute Mo so you can ask the question yourself.
Hey, thanks for the presentation. It's very interesting and very deep tech. I just asked the question. I saw teams hire ethical hackers to test their security. I don't know, security layers.
Yeah, that's the pen test that I mentioned about. So several security expert company who do try to find contract to run pen tests. Yeah. Okay.
That was the penetration test that was mentioned in the previous slide, right?
Yep. Yep. So I think I'm out of time. So about me, a principal DevOps engineer at iConnective. So you, if you curious what it's doing, you can look at that URL. My interest is in automation, CI/CD, and AWS technologies. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Fee. Andrea, back to you, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. And our next speaker tonight is Gary, who will talking about emergent planning. And what's special about Gary is that he's an agile coach who works with everything from startup company to a Fortune 10 company. So that must be a lot of different situations here.
So yeah, so let me see here. If I do this, I need to, sorry, I should have checked this before, but it's not letting me share on my end. Try this again. Yeah, it's not allowing me to.
It's not allowing you to share your screen, or what, Gary?
Yeah, let me see if I can. Trying to see how to get around this. Try this. Oh, maybe because it's up right now. The other thing I can try and do is join in from a different machine, but let me, I don't know which is easier. Hold on, let me give me 1 second real quick here. Let me.
In the meantime, I see Morris joins, who I can vouch for. He's a real person. Maybe while Gary is figuring out, Morris, you can introduce yourself. You can also start your video if you feel comfortable.
Sure. This is Morris. Hi, I've haven't been here in quite a while. Happy to be back. I'm not actively using Agile, but I'm familiar with it, and I've enjoyed these sessions whenever I join. I always find them very helpful.
Thank you,
Happy to
Morris.
be. Yep.
And you know that we could see that picture on your wall.
Yeah, I think I wasn't able to see my camera, so I'm not sure what I was showing. Sorry about that.
Picture is nice. It's okay. Okay.
Recording in progress.
Now we have 2 Garys.
Yeah, and one of them has to mute.
Yes.
So Todd is writing in the chat, happy to go next if it would help while Gary's working on his display. Andrea, what do you say?
Yeah, that's
Okay, here we are.
and now we have to have this sound.
Yeah. Can somebody mute my second?
Well, the second is muted, so I don't know what else we can do.
Yeah.
What if you unlock from the session you are not presenting, the screen you are not presenting?
Okay. Is that better now?
Yep.
It's good. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So let me just real quick here. Okay, I'm trying to find my other. I'm trying to turn on my video, but I guess I can't do that. So anyway, don't worry about it. So today I wanted to talk about planning, and planning is something that we all do, and it's really important, but plans are, they're not very accurate. And the way that we usually do them locks us into a whole fixed course of action, sometimes for a long period of time. So question becomes, how do we plan in a more emergent world where there's uncertainty, and how do we determine what's the right amount of planning? Okay. Okay. All right. So there are lots of this talk came from a lean coffee session that I had at Agile 2022. I was participating in, and there were people who were more from the more formal end of Agile thought, who practice SAFe and things like that. That we have to do program level planning, and that has to cover like 8 to 12 weeks worth of stuff, and doing really complex upfront planning. And then there were other folks like Woody Zool, who's a big mob programming person, who was like, you shouldn't do any programming, that once you start doing work, what you need to do will kind of emerge out of that. And so those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum. And generally we probably want to be somewhere in the middle of those. The factors that we need to consider that are there, whether or not we recognize them or not, is how much learning do we need to do? How much do we not know how much uncertainty is there on how long things are going to take? Are we even working on the right things? How will our customers respond to things? And so based on how much uncertainty is there, the levers that we have in terms of our planning is we can control the length of our plan. So how far out are we planning? How much time do we spend on the plan? How often do we revisit the plan? Do we, like, once the plan's set, we just follow it? Or do we go back and tweak it as we go along? And how do we use it as a tool to discuss when we're reviewing progress and status from time to time? So there's all sorts of uncertainty that's actually there in our projects and our product development, whether we admit it or not. And what I would say is that the things that I've highlighted in blue here are things that we generally don't include in our plan or don't think about in our plan. Things like, are we even working on the right problem, right? Is this something that's going to move the needle? Is it going to generate revenue? Is it, right? And then once you've kind of figured out the right problems to be solving for, like, we don't know whether we have the best solution or not, right? And so we need to iterate on these things, and the plan has to help us think through that and work through that uncertainty. So historically, right, the good old Gantt chart, right, is how we used to kind of do our planning, or at least display our planning and talk about our planning. And unfortunately, I still see a lot of this, even in places where supposedly they have agile practices. The reason why this can be problematic, if there's any sort of uncertainty or unknowns or variability there, is because this assumes that we have perfect knowledge of what we need to do and how long it's going to take to do it and how well we can execute it right at the beginning of the project, when of course we know the least about the project. And we've scheduled everything in, so there's no really room to go pivot or do different things other than what we originally planned. So beyond that, it's really not transparent when you think about it, like transparent, like this is how things actually are, because it tells us we're going to finish this project on a specific date. And any of us who've worked with software projects know that you don't know exactly when it's going to hit. And so it'd be much more transparent to say, hey, we know we're working on this next, and then we think we're going to get to this and this. And so that is missing there from the traditional plan. And this highlights a, kind of a much more general anti-pattern that I've seen when people are trying to drive agility, is they're dependent on one-time processes. Like sometimes with planning, it's a one-time process that's right up front. And then sometimes it's things that are like one-time things at the end, things like sign-offs, approvals, even like security reviews and things like legal reviews, things like that, which would be much better if we could get feedback as we go along so we can adjust and adapt rather than doing all this work only to find out, oh, we're not working on the right thing, or, oh, we messed up on this, this won't scale, and things like that. So, but strictly from a planning process, when we plan just one time up front, we, it gets treated as a commitment, right? Like, this is what we're going to do, and this is when we're going to get it done. And it gives us no room to benefit from the things that we learn along the way. So the question becomes, how do we move from a one-time process to a continuous planning process? And so, like, this is a basic economic concept, but the cheaper that something is to do, the more often you're likely to do it. So if we could make planning easier, meaning less time consuming, we would be likely to do it more often and revisit it and kind of benefit from several iterations. So one of the things that I've seen the last few years in many Agile teams is something I've seen called Team Tetris, but it's basically an agile release roadmap, and it kind of breaks down by team, although you don't have to do that. Here's what we're going to be working on each sprint, right? And then there's several nice things about this. So number one, it's higher level. We're not talking about specific activities like we do in a Gantt chart. We're talking about epic level groups of features or capabilities, which is better than talking about activities. And because it's higher level, the teams have more room to kind of maneuver and adapt within that general area. It does not require much time to go through this type of planning. You could do it in 15 or 30 minutes every sprint, and you just need the right people in the room. And it's something that you can revisit every sprint, so you can you can adapt and like, okay, maybe I thought I was going to do payment processing for 4 sprints, but after the first 2 sprints realize, hey, that's enough payment processing for now. We should focus on different areas. We can just simply change that. So that's the good part about this. So this is a step forward in terms of dealing with uncertainty and adaptability. And along with that, when you think about how can we report out, in terms of our progress, and anybody who's waiting on the work that we're doing, do we have a way to kind of take this information, this type of planning, and kind of have discussions with our stakeholders, customers, things like that. And this is a format in which we can do that. So in the story points delivery column, it doesn't have to be story points, but you kind of get a sense for, this is how much work we think is there. This is how much we've gotten done so far, right? So you get some sort of idea of the progress we've made, although we can always decide to do more or less as we go along. And then the really neat thing here is we're talking specifically about, here's where we're going to focus during the next sprint, right, in each of these areas. And we can talk about the learnings that we made in the last sprint, and talk about the decisions that we made based off of that. And that really forms a nice basis of conversation with internal stakeholders or anybody who you're working with, to get to the heart of, are we working on the right things, and are we moving in the right direction, and possibly even, hey, can we start, can we push this out to customers for them to start to benefit and to get more feedback from. So this is better, right? It's more continuous, it's more flexible, but it's still focused on outputs, right? Not necessarily outcomes, business outcomes, which is really kind of the gold standard that we want to do these days. That's why we're all here, is to help our customers achieve certain outcomes, and for our business to make money and things like that. So, so we really want to, even get further away from outputs to outcomes if we can. And we also want to leave room for kind of revisiting things and going back, and even serendipity, which you really can't do when you don't have any, I don't have any blank spaces here, right? This kind of implies that, hey, this is what I'm going to work on. And even though we're more flexible about it, it still implies we're like a, like a factory floor, right? And we're just churning out features, which is not necessarily what we want to do. So there are some even newer ways that people use to try and talk about outcomes and about progress and status. And so I don't know how many of you are familiar with Teresa Torres, and she's very big on continuous discovery, and she works more on the ideation side, where we're trying to figure out what is it that we want to put in, not just features, but starting from the outcome and then deciding, hey, what problems can we solve to drive that outcome? What sort of opportunities are there? And we can sort of rank them in terms of importance. And then we can start to say, what are potential solutions for those opportunities? And then what are the big assumptions that would make those solutions viable or valuable? and what experiments can we do to kind of quickly determine whether or not those are things that we want to move forward on, or things that aren't going to be viable and we should move on to something else, right? So it's definitely at the earlier stages of product development, but it has a tree structure, right? It's really easy to add on as things emerge, as new opportunities emerge, as new experiments emerge, possible solutions, things that we learn from doing earlier experiments. It's easy to represent that here in the tree, and it's easy to use this as a basis for conversation. Hey, last week we did these experiments. We learned that these solutions weren't viable. These solutions are viable. Now we're going to move on to trying to validate this next assumption, which will then allow us to move forward, with kind of more delivery focus, for that particular solution. So that's kind of one approach at a new format. And then this is kind of similar in that it's also a tree, but this is more focused on the delivery side. And this is something that I saw Ron Quartel speaking about. He's kind of created this a fluid scaling technology, fast agile kind of methodology or approach. And he's done a lot of work with Industrial Logic, who's a big agile consulting company. And they together kind of came up with this concept of discovery trees. And the idea here is this is what the delivery team is working on. And again, we can quickly see what's done. What are the things the team is going to be working on? Because it's a tree, you can either have really high level placeholders, or you can go down to more detail. You can go down to more detail as as you kind of figure out, as things emerge from what you've done in the previous day or sprint or week or whatever, it then sets the stage for what you're going to do going forward. And so also a good communication mechanism. So, all right, I know we're kind of up against it. So just to kind of finish off, the more that we push from activities to outcomes, the higher value we're going to provide, but the more uncertainty, which means that it's more, we're going more towards discovery, which means that we have to think about how we change our planning. And, and really the key takeaways are, make sure you recognize the amount of uncertainty that's actually there. Make sure that's reflected in your plans and how you think about planning. Make your planning cheaper so we do it more often. Planning's important. The plan itself isn't as important. And make space for learning and adaptation as part of your plans. So, and this is how you can, get a hold of me if you want to talk about the topic further. So,
and by the way, if you give me your slide, we can put them on Slack, or if you have also access to Slack, there is a Lightning Talk channel, so everyone can refer to it at their pace. That's an option, yeah.
Okay.
And our last speaker for the night, Todd. Well, thank you very much. You have all our attention. So Todd will speak about empowerment in the modern agile organization. And so Todd is an experienced agile and executive coach working at Mile 20. So the floor is to you, Todd.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Excellent. And can everyone see my slides?
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Appreciate it. All right. And appreciate you all for sticking in there. I'll make you two promises. I'll go as fast as I can, and I will not show you my feet. So I'd like to talk a bit today about empowerment in the Agile organization. So as you said, I'm an Agile coach. I've been doing Agile coaching for about 15 years. I've also an executive coach. I'm about to get my certification with the International Coaching Federation, hopefully next month, fingers crossed. So I'm more interested in the human side of Agile. I'm interested in all parts, but that's really what's drawing me to Agile and everything. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. So first off, what's the modern Agile organization? I like to think of it in this way, right? So kind of abstracted, it has three things, right? We anticipate, we adapt, and then we act. And I kind of unpack that in a couple of different ways. So anticipate meaning change is inevitable, right? It's everywhere. We know it's going to happen. It's the only constant out there, right? So by anticipating, it's kind of like planning, like we were just talking about. We should anticipate change, disruptions, but we can manage that. But being good Agile people, we don't want to, spend too much time there. We don't want to spend too little time. So it's a balancing act. We're anticipating the immediate future, potentially, changes to long-term plans, but whatever we do, we're seeing change as an opportunity to improve, right? So we're looking into the future, anticipating potential changes and looking for ways to change what we're doing, how we're doing it, all that good stuff. And then we make those changes based on the changes around us in our environment. We adapt, we cultivate these self-organizing teams that can make informed decisions that's in service to solving our problems and accomplishing our goals. Right. So we put together these structures that allow us to change quickly, and then we act, right? We can share, create knowledge. That's what employees do, right? They're acting, they are taking in what's happening. They're creating and sharing knowledge across the organization. That's part of the self-organization. They're focusing execution on iterative improvement, right? We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for a little bit better next time. And at the end of the day, the act is we're striving for a high performance at a sustainable pace. So that's kind of how I view the modern Agile organization, abstracted from kind of processes and methodologies and things of that nature. And this is really a cycle, right? Like all good Agile things, you can kind of rinse and repeat and do it again and again. And really, this is trying to build an environment that people can be their best selves and do their best work. And at the core of it is self-direction, self-organization. I kind of use those two terms synonymously. Self-direction is really the fundamental part here, right? It's really what Agile is built upon. This idea that we're pushing decisions down to the lowest level. People are utilizing their expertise, activating it in service to helping us accomplish our goals. And what is self-direction? I love Kimball Fisher's term. He wrote this great book called Leading Self-Directed Work Teams. It's an older book. Some of the examples in it are dated, but the core of it is still really, really good. And he defined it as a group of employees who have day-to-day responsibility for managing themselves and the work that they do with a minimum of direct supervision. Now, it doesn't mean no supervision, right? There's an opportunity for managers and leaders to provide guidance, to set goals and constraints, the guide rails in which the teams are self-managing themselves. But we're still looking for those self-managed teams. And to me, when you talk about self-managed, self-directed teams, what's the key part of it? It's really empowerment. I mean, in the teams that I've worked with, there's a lot of structures and things that you can put in place to get these teams to become self-managed, self-organized. But if they don't feel empowered, if they're not acting empowered, it all kind of falls short. You end up in Agile and name only, you end up with people that are just kind of going through the motions. So empowerment. But again, you'll see I like to unpack things. All right, empowerment, what does that mean? It could be one of these suitcase terms. What I think empowerment is can be different than what you say. So again, I want to go back to Kimball Fisher. He defined empowerment as ARIA. And I won't read through this directly because you can see it, but what's interesting about it is these four aspects: accountability, resources, information, and authority. And what Fisher is saying, and what I've come to believe is 100% true, if you don't have all of these four elements, the person, the team, whomever you're working with, they're not empowered, right? So if you look at it, it's like, so if you have accountability, but you don't have resources, really you just have permission to do something, but you're not necessarily empowered to do it, right? In the same way, if you have, all the other things, but you don't necessarily have the accountability, kind of paternalistic, right? So it's like, here's a bunch of stuff, go do something, but we're not really holding you accountable. You end up in a kind of a vague state, right? So all of these things play together in a very interesting an important way. And I think this is a good way to look at it, because you can say, I guess I want to make one other thing here, because a lot of it is around how these things play together, right? So you have information, which I think is really fascinating, because it's the data that the teams and the people get, but it's also the why behind what they're doing, right? So if you don't have all the things, it's the context in which you're setting. I'm losing the thread a bit, but I think you get what I'm saying about in terms of each one of these factors is important. So if we settle into that, then, well, how do we get there? How do we foster empowerment? How do we build ARIA across our groups? And to me, it's a two-way street, right? A lot of times we talk about leaders and managers, and in the Agile space, there's a lot of talk around, well, we could be successful if the leaders only got it. And I do get that, but there's a bit of a dance here, because what I've seen is that a lot of leaders and managers are waiting for teams. They're waiting for them to become interested in, become good at, cultivate the skills of making business decisions. But employees and teams tend to wait for the permission to act, right? If you've had, anyways, someone needs to go first. And so if we look at empowerment in ARIA, it's upon leaders and managers to provide these things, to provide the information, to provide the resources, to provide the accountability. But employees and teams also need to ask for it, right? They need to say, in order to be successful, I need these things. I need the accountability. I need the resources. I need the information. So I think it's a two-way street. And as coaches, as people that are looking to foster agility, we need to be aware that there's two levels here. So with that in mind, let's look at what each level could do to foster that. So for leaders, this is a model I really, really like. And what it is it's marrying, you can see at the bottom, situational leadership with Tuckerman's famous team development model, right? So you have a team, they form, they storm, they norm, and then they perform. So as a leader, it's actually, I think, a bit of a paradox in Agile teams, in which self-direction just doesn't happen naturally. You do need someone needs to come along and kind of direct, okay, we're a team. They're deciding who's on the team. They decide what that team is working on and things like that. In other words, they're directing the team. They're being a little bit, well, they're being directive. Directive can be a bit of a bad word in Agile, but I think it has its place at the beginning. Good Agile leaders are very conscious of where a team is. And when they start moving from, okay, we get what we need to do, all that comes into play, and they move into the storming phase, which is where there starts being some, interpersonal conflict, potentially, maybe some power struggles, things of that nature. That's where a good leader turns into coaching, right? So they start thinking about, okay, how can I help these people imagine possibilities of the way it is to work and see themselves, see the effects of their how they're speaking, how they're acting, how they're interacting together. They coach that team through the storming process until they get it. They start norming. They're like, okay, this is how we want to work together. And once they're at that phase, then the leader can work into the support mode. What can I do to help you? What can I do to get things out of your way? And then ideally, once a team gets to high performance, the leader can then delegate. And that's where the real power of Agile comes in, once you have that self-directing team. So this is what leaders can do to foster empowerment, to foster and create ARIA. What can teams do? Well, they can prepare for self-direction. So they can do this by when it first excuse me, when a team first gets together, right? They can, and I guess I should say, I look at this in two ways, right? You have newly formed teams, but you also have traditional teams, right? So if you have people that have worked together for a while and they're making a transition to Agile or a different form of Agile, right? Going from Scrum to a more complicated version like SAFe, or I've even seen teams, go from different versions to Kanban, whatever it is. Like, that's not going to happen automatically. And so you can prepare for that. You can foster trust amongst the group that we're all rowing in the same direction. You can cultivate ARIA to start off with. So make sure, okay, in order to get this done, we're going to need all the information, the resources, the accountability, and so on and so forth. Then once you start, as you were all been saying, right, it involves some experimentation, and there needs to be slack in the system in order to do that. Okay, while we're figuring this out, we're going to need to run some experiments. We may try this one week and that doesn't work. We may try this another week and that doesn't work. We have to kind of bake that into what we're doing. And here's where teams can help leaders. Help them understand that they need to be patient with potential dips in performance. It's not going to be permanent, right? These are experiments. We need to figure out how we're working together. So this is where transparency around the experiments that we're running, lessons we're learning from, things that maybe didn't go so well, and the things we're doing to improve it. Being transparent with leadership and managers will really help them become more comfortable with that, particularly when there are deadlines involved. And then, at the end, when you're implementing things, you really do need to balance risk and reward. If something is risky, really time box that, or maybe don't do that experiment right at the beginning, save that for later. Now, once you're actually doing it, then, we should keep at it, right? It's going to be hard at first. It's going to be easy, particularly when things get hard. The end of the quarter comes, quarterly numbers are due, all that good stuff. The product is, the deadline is approaching. Stick with it, right? Those are the times where it's going to be hard, but if you can stick with it and get over that hump through those, particularly those storming modes, it's really going to be worth it. And then you can get to that self-improvement. Once you get that rolling, then everything's going to go much more smoothly from there. So watch out, self-directed teams. This is really fascinating when I learned this for the first time. They're a means to an end, not the end in itself, right? You could have a self-directed team that's working really well together. But at the end of the day, if they're not accomplishing their goals, if they're not hitting their commitments, then you probably need to shake something up with that team. So just something to keep in mind, because it's easy, I think, to lose the forest through the trees here. We kind of assume self-direction solves everything, and it may not. A team may self-organize in a way where they're not, on their edge, where they're not challenging themselves enough. And so we should just be conscious of that. So in closing, ARIA, a really powerful way to empower teams, empowering teams through self-organization. And I think there's 3 questions you can ask as you start thinking about, well, how can we implement ARIA in our organization? Because there are aspects of this in your organization already. You may not just be kind of looking at it consciously, right? So ask yourselves, where are we strong in ARIA? Like, what aspects are really, really strong? What aspects can we improve? What would it take to move from a 3 to a 4 or a 4 to a 5? And at the end of the day, are we achieving our goals, right? So as you're working on cultivating ARIA and doing these things, never lose sight of the fact that you're doing these things to get better at what it is you're doing, which is delivering value to our customers, making them happy so they want to buy our stuff, and go from there. So that's empowerment in the Agile organization. Thanks for your time and attention. I really appreciate you sticking with me and through all the other talks. My contact information is here. I heard there's I just joined the Slack channel, so I can put these slides in the channel there. But feel free to reach out to me with any questions, or you just want to chat. I love making other connections, and thanks again.
So do we have time for questions, Andrea?
So we have like 2 minutes. Fernando, you can confirm if I get my...
Yes, and we are almost at the end of the time box, so I think that Todd was the last presenter.
Yes.
Can I have
just
maybe one
question? Yes.
Yeah, maybe one question, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So Todd, really interesting. I'm just wondering, let's say you are a leader, your team is awesome. They are self-directing, they're enthusiastic, but the decisions they make, you see, they don't see it, but you do as a more mature person. You see they are not exactly the right decisions. They will not get them to the right point in time, to the right result. How do you go about it?
So yeah, if you have a team, what I'm hearing you say is they're performing well, there's the decisions are not necessarily, they're not having the effect that the leader wants. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, so you already see that the approach they are planning to take to certain things, it is not going to work, but they will only discover it later on, but you already know it from the start.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, right? Because that's where, when I'm saying balance risk and reward, right? That's something that I think the leader really needs to take into account, because we learn through our mistakes, right? And Agile is brilliant in this because we say, okay, you know, we're going to try something, but we're going to time box it. So, you know, we're going to stop at the time box and then see how that's going, and then we can adjust accordingly. So ideally, I'd say with that leader, if you can let them make that decision.
Fail in a small size.
Small as possible, right? Now, that can't always happen, right? So sometimes I think a leader does need to say, look, I've seen this play out before, you know, this is probably what's going to happen. And so they might step in and say, you know, look, in this situation, I'm going to pull my leader card and I'm going to do this. But I would say in that sense, they should really step into the coaching stance and say, here are the reasons why, you know, kind of walk them through it and give them a chance to ask questions and kind of, you know, poke holes in it, if you will. So don't just, you know, lay it down and walk away. Allow people to absorb it and the why behind it. But so in short, I think it's a balance of risk and reward in terms of how much rope can you give them to make this decision. But then once you do make sure that people are on board or at least understand it, even if they don't like it.
Joseph, I see that you raise your hand, but we are really running out of time. So I would recommend taking the discussion to the Slack channel or reaching out to Todd directly.
Yeah, ping me in the Slack channel and we can chat there tomorrow, because I'm gonna go play with the kids after this. But we can touch base tomorrow.